In this speech, I am honoring all of the females in China who were affected by the one-child policy. Starting in the 1980s, the Chinese government enforced a policy amongst the country which meant that people were only allowed to have one child per family. The purpose of this policy was supposed to lower the population rate since they were struggling with overpopulation, but it just added more issues to their plate, mainly for the daughters and the mothers. Before we get into the details, it is important to know that the policy changed at the beginning of 2016. It is now the two-child policy, but it is still upsetting that residents in China aren't allowed to have as many children as they want. The biggest issue is that orphanages were overflowing like crazy with girls. A big issue is that orphanages were overflowing like crazy with girls. This is because in China, sons are way more favored than daughters, so when people had a daughter, they would just give her up to an orphanage so that they could try again for a son. With this, orphanages had way more than what the workers could handle, so many of these little girls were neglected since the caregivers could barely take care of everyone. For example, many children were tied into chairs to make it easier to watch. These girls lived awful lives until they were old enough to move out on their own. And the daughters in China weren't just neglected in orphanages, but also their households too. Many families would simply just hide their daughter or daughters from the government. They did this so that they could keep trying for a son. These daughters went most of their lives without ever being registered. They weren't allowed to go to school, go out and make friends, or anything. Now that these little girls are all grown up, they are very little educated and have very little social experiences, making it hard for them to make a life out of themselves. And if the families didn't want to do this, they would just have an abortion once they found out that they were having a baby girl. A big problem with these abortions is that the mother of the children wouldn't always agree to them. Many women reported getting taken, tied up to a table, and having an unwilling, painful abortion, like getting needles stabbed straight through their bellies. Most of these abortions happened whenever the women were already pregnant for 7 to 8 months, which caused a huge risk of death for the mother. Another horrible factor for the girls whose parents didn't have the abortions, they would just wait for the baby girl to be born, and since the orphanages were full, they would find anywhere to get rid of the baby. Infant female bodies were found in dumpsters and baskets or boxes in alleyways, floating in bodies of waters, and pretty much anywhere. There were findings of dead baby girls as well. They were drowned, poisoned, and suffocated. So many little girls struggled because of this policy. Statistics show more than 230,000 baby girls were killed after 1981. Once the government found out that people were hiding their children or simply getting rid of them somewhere, they started making it mandatory to get IUDs or become sterilized after they had their first child. And if these families got stuck with a daughter, the mother would be the one to be looked down upon. They would blame it on the mother that they didn't get a son, so the mom would get harshly scorned or even abused. And to get unstuck from having a daughter, the husband would file a divorce so that they could find a new wife to try again for a son, which made many single mothers. Overall, females got hit the hardest when this policy set. I wanted to honor all of the women that had to go through this policy and all of the young girls that were a part of it. With little girls getting neglected or murdered, and mothers getting abused, left, or forced to do painful things, depression rates in these females shot through the roof. They all went through so much and are still getting affected to this day.